From his lookout in the London suburb of Shepperton, where he's lived for over 40 years, JG Ballard talks about his vision of what he calls the only alien planet, Earth, and tells us why science fiction was the true literature of the 20th century.
I was living in London and looking for somewhere to live with my wife and children. And the sort of London suburbs were a sort of vast, mysterious plain of bricky gables and dual carriageways. The one place that I spotted, where there was a little house, it was for sale, was Shepperton, and I had a vague feeling, the film studios, yes, the Malibu of the Thames Valley. And I thought, well, you know, there's a dimension of possibility there. Melvyn, pleasure to meet you.
Very good to meet you.
You look well.
It's
incredible.
Good to see you, Dust. In your favourite aircraft.
I like it. It's great. If I could rent it, I'd happily move in.
So if we get set up, we'll get moving on. You were brought up, as it were, in Shanghai. Many people watching this will know the film Empire of the Sun if they haven't read the book or know both. But in your terms, can you give us some idea of what you now feel, looking back, it was like to be brought up in Shanghai?
My parents were both English. My father and mother went out there in 1929. I was born there in 1930. I have very strong memories of this exciting, in some ways frightening city, where as a child of one of the Western powers who ran the city, I had a sort of passport to safety at all times. I mean, I used to get on my bike at the age of 7 or 8 and pedal off through downtown Shanghai in all that sort of nightmare traffic. And this was a city plagued by terrorist bombs and bitter fighting between rival Chinese power groups. Then in 1937, the Japanese invaded China. War was all around us. Shells were passing over our house, so we moved to the French concession for about 6 months.
But one thing that intrigues me about what you've said there is this extraordinary charmed life you had, Jim. You were this English boy, you got on your bike, your English bike, and cycled through these very dangerous parts, and people left you alone.
I don't think my parents were aware of what I was doing. I once asked my mother, when she was a very old woman, I used to ride my bicycle around Shanghai. She said, we didn't know. I think the reason was that the retaliation from the Shanghai police force, which was run by the British, would have been swift and brutal. So you tended to be left alone. And all that changed very dramatically after Pearl Harbor, when Japan attacked. And I suddenly noticed that nobody was treating me with any respect at all.
Almost 40 years later, when you went back to the imprint of those times to write Empire of the Sun, which became an extremely successful book, an extremely successful film, had you been wanting to write it during those 40 years?
I think when I came to England in 1946, I soon realized that I was going to spend the rest of my life here, effectively. So I thought, there's no point in trying to remember Shanghai and my life there. It's gone. Forget it. The trouble was that Shanghai kept coming back.
Did you deliberately omit certain things to make it dramatically more effective, or did it just evolve the way it did without you making those sort of conscious decisions?
No, I had to leave a lot of things out. It was impossible to compress 4 to 5 years of life, particularly when so much was happening. Most of the novel is set in the Japanese camp where I was interned with my parents. The biggest change I made was to leave my parents out. I made the boy, my younger self in effect, Jim, a kind of war orphan. I had him separated from his parents. A certain sort of estrangement took place during the camp years between me and my parents. And you know, they couldn't feed me, clothe me, protect me. Also, I saw them shaken and rattled by the war. For a child these days, to see its parents frightened is very rare. And when you've seen your parents sort of lose their authority, it's something they never regain, I think. So leaving them out was was truer psychologically to my actual experiences. Human beings are extremely cruel and combative. And I think my life in Shanghai in the 30s and 40s was much closer to the reality of this world than, say, living in a cosy suburb to the west of London. I don't feel that Shanghai was such a bad preparation for living in our time.
When you came here, you decided to study medicine. What made you go in that direction?
I think I thought, if I become a psychiatrist, my first patient will be me. I will find out what's wrong. I'm not sure there was anything wrong, but I just carried too much of a burden from the past. To become a psychiatrist then, in 1950, you needed a medical degree. And I thoroughly enjoyed the 2 years I spent as a medical student, particularly the anatomy, dissecting cadavers.
Why did you drop out of medicine and join the RAF?
I was already writing short stories, and I sort of told myself I was already a novelist. I'd written sort of 20 pages, and when you're a novice, as you know, when you're first setting out, 20 pages of a novel when you're 19 seems like Finnegan's Wake. So I thought, I'll take my chances. Then I had a number of jobs. Then I thought, I'll try flying. So I spent about a year in the RAF, or the Royal Canadian Air Force, actually. But I still, I had to make another break and embark on what was quite a difficult set of obstacles to cross, becoming a published writer. Not easy.
How and why did you decide to write science fiction?
What England needed, I felt, in the mid-50s, desperately, was change. It seemed so stuck in its ways. Its social conventions and its class system were all set in concrete. And when I discovered, by chance, science fiction, I thought, here's a literature which has terrific vitality and is about change. I wasn't interested in spaceships and time travel. I thought, this is a medium where I can put to use my interest in social change. The American way of life, the consumer society, television, which was going to dominate everything. First jet travel, motorways. We take them for granted now, but motorways provoked all sorts of worried letters to the Times newspaper when the M1 was opened. Are we going to Americanize our country? Do we want a deracinated people endlessly driving their cars up and down the land? I thought, what? This is a motorway, for heaven's sake. It was important to write about change, and science fiction was a very good way. Also, I had a flair for it.
You also, in some of the statements you made, are firmly of the opinion that science fiction is the true and best way to write about the situation in which we find ourselves.
I thought science fiction was the literature of the 20th century. I think science fiction has played back the 20th century to itself in a way that the mainstream novel doesn't. If you think of the Hampstead novel, it describes a very small social class engaged in very small sort of location